Hello humans, this is AB Computer Science A and we are looking at array lists. Alright, so we're going to jump right into Eclipse here. There we are. And we're going to go through some array list basics. So I want to start with the most important part of array lists, which is the declaration and initialization. Because when we start dealing with a new variable type, we need to know how to declare it and how to initialize it. Now, array lists are an object type similar to strings. So there's an array list class in Java that's going to be at the core of how this variable functions versus something like a primitive type like an int. Because it's an object type, it's actually an object type that can store multiple objects within it. So like a list of other objects. Now we can throw primitives into it, so we can throw ints in it, but what it really does is it puts integer objects in it, which is integer is a wrapper class in Java, which is like capital I integer, and there's like a capital D double, and they basically just take a primitive type like an int and convert it into an object format so that it can be stored inside of an array list. So we can do that. We can put integers and doubles and stuff in there, but they'll be treated like objects when they're in the array list. So that's an important distinction to make. Let's look at notation. So I have a private array list. You'll notice the capitalization here because it is an object type, capital A, capital L. And then triangular brackets. It's our first time dealing with triangular brackets. Inside there, we declare the type of object that we're going to store in this list. Now, unlike lists in Python, where you can store objects of different types in the same list, array lists make you declare the type of variable that can be in that list, and that's it. Only one type per list. All right, so this one's going to be filled with strings. Here's my variable name. I called it fruits equals new. So we're calling on a constructor here, a new array list object full of strings, double brackets for the constructor, and then semicolon. Now you'll notice no size. So with arrays, we had to hard code that size when we declared it and initialized it. Don't have to do that with array lists, so it can be empty, and then we can add to it. Oh, that's going to be exciting. All right. So let's look at how we can do this. So in my main, I'm just going to call my constructor. So ArrayList practice, my object is new ArrayList practice. Awesome. And all my constructor is going to do is it's going to call this method fillArray. So let's see what's happening in fillArray, and then we'll go from there. So here's fillArray. All I'm doing is calling on the name of my list, which in this case is fruits, and it's a field variable, it's a class variable, so I can access it in my constructor. .add, that's one of the many methods that come with array lists. When you look at the autofill menu, when you do fruits dot, you can see that there's a lot of methods there. And you can go look at the array list documentation to see how many methods there are and what you can do with them. So the .add is just going to add something onto the end of the list. Okay? And what is it going to add? Well, it's going to add what my literal string is. Now this could be a variable string as well. This could also be like new string, banana. That's also fine. Create a new temporary object and then pass it directly to the add. However you want to do that, it's going to function the same way. So I'm just using the add to put these in here in order. So first to last. So the last on the list will be banana. First one on the list is banana. All right. So let's say I want to call this. So let's say I want to print this. So the first thing we should try is just printing it. So like if I did a system.out.println my obj.fruits. Let's just see what happens when we try to print that. So you'll see it actually printed it. Do you know why? Because it's an object class and it's got a toString method, which means it's actually going to make sense of the array list without us having to manually loop through to print it. It's beautiful. Once you've worked with arrays for a little while, you really can enjoy array lists very quickly. That's one thing there. Let's see what other methods I've got written. So I've got one to remove all that takes a string and a list. It's going to remove all elements of that string from the list. Ooh, all right. So let's say I wanted to remove all the bananas from this list. So let's do print it, and then let's do myobj.removeAll, and we're going to remove banana from myobj.fruits from that particular list. Now I could always have that list called directly as a class variable inside the function, but it's good for us to practice passing things as parameters to methods. It's very normal. And then we're going to print it again. Here we go. Just going to print it out. All right. Bunch of bananas in there, and then it's going to print it again. and there's no banana. So it successfully removed them. Now, how did it do that? We're looping. We're looping through the array list, starting from 0. Ooh, we got a new method again. Dot size, and notice it's a method. It's got the double parentheses. So arrays we'd use dot length with no parentheses. Now we're using array lists with parentheses, and it's a size, not a length. Very common mistake. Usually AP College Board won't penalize you if you use size instead of length or length instead of size. But it's good practice, especially if you're coding. You're going to need to get it right. And then if s dot equals ignore case, array dot get I, so s remembers a string I brought in. If it's equal to the dot get, notice get, now we're going and grabbing something at an index. This would have been box notation with arrays. Now we're using dot get to go grab it. So we grab it, now we've got it. Okay, so then we do the comparison between the strings, and we're going to now do a remove. So go to index I and remove that from the list, bumping everything back down to the position. So that great little functionality here with removes and adds and gets. It's awesome. And then I do this silly I minus minus. Now I wonder why I did this. Oh, that's right. Because it's dynamically sized list. So what happens when I remove it? Let's say I was looping through 10 items. So when I first got to my for loop, array.size was 10. Okay? Starting from 0 going to 9. That's awesome. As soon as I call this remove, my array size is now 9. Which means when it comes back up to rerun the loop, it's now only going from 0 to 8. Well, what is going to happen is as soon as I remove that item, my index I has not changed, but it's now pointing at a different value. So what's going to happen is when it increments to I++, that value will have gotten skipped. So what I'm doing is when I remove the item from the list, I'm decrementing I by 1 to make sure I don't skip over the new thing that's in the box where the value I removed is pointing, right? Because that box used to have a banana in it, but now it has whatever came after banana in it. So if I just iterate, I will have skipped it. By doing an I minus minus, I go back so that I'll actually look in that box again to see that it has a new value in it. So that's really important and really key. So I also have a display array list. This is just looping to show it. Now I obviously have it here with just using the toString, but there's no reason we can't also write our own, right? So I can do my own, and I have mine doing it vertically, right? So you can see the difference between mine and the toString. Okay, so how am I doing that? Well, I think I did it with a for each loop. For each string called E contained in the array, which is the array list object that's been passed to my method, print out that element with a new line at the end. So this is just a really quick for each loop. Now, you can do some funky stuff in for each loops. Be very careful when you're inside of a for each loop because you don't have access to the index that you're at. So they're really helpful to use for each loops with array lists for all kinds of purposes. But typically if we want to do any removing or any manipulation like that, we want to make sure that we're in a standard for loop so we have control over the index. And then I have a display array list backwards. So this is just going to run through from the top down. So there's a couple ways to do this. You could use a for loop and do the index I size minus 1 and then go down. But we can also call this collections.reverse. So an array list is part of a collections class, and we talk about inheritance later. You can start to see a little bit of how that works. But the collections class is like above the array list class in the hierarchy. So you can call collections.reverse and pass it the array list. And what it's going to do is it's going to reverse the values in that list. And then I just do a for each to print them. And then I just reverse it again. So it's back to its original state. So this is actually modifying that temporary variable. So it's important to note that that is how that's working. Okay. Now let's just run that real quick with the reversal. So we'll run it backwards. Okay, and we'll run that. So here it is printed out backwards. So let's just do a little bit of tweaking here. We're going to comment out a few things here. What I want to do is this. I'm going to print it backwards, and then I'm going to print it forwards. But in between the two, I'm not going to re-reverse the list. Now, the reason I'm doing this, let's think for a second. I'm passing a variable to this method, and then the method is reversing that temporary local variable inside of my method, and then printing, and then I'm exiting the method. So if we're dealing with something that is not passed by reference, then the second print should be totally normal. The list should not have been reversed still. But if we're dealing with pass by reference like we were with arrays, then the list is still going to be reversed. So let's run this and see what happens. So I get my banana down to my banana, and then banana down to banana. The list is still reversed. Okay? Maybe we can make this a little simpler if we were using numbers or something like that in our fill array. I'm just going to replace my fill array with like the words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll come back and we'll look at how it works then. Okay, so my array should now be filled with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I print it before I call the reversal, and then print the reversal and then print it again, and maybe I'll just stick some dashes in the middle. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then in reverse, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then still reverse 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which means these array lists are being passed by reference when they're getting passed to it. Because the fruits variable is getting passed as a variable to the method. The method is only modifying the local variable name that it has. And yet the original variable fruits is still being considered to be reversed. So just be cautious with that when we're dealing with array lists. So just to iterate that one last time, I just made a few modifications here. So I created a little method called messer, which takes an array list called AL, and all it does is it does a dot add of 6. So then if I fill my array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I print it, I call messer, which should add that. But remember, I'm passing that to there. So typical variables are actually going to only modify the local variable inside of the method, but this is going to actually add to the original fruits array. Because you can see when we print fruits again at the end, the 6 is there. All right, so that's your answer to array lists. Good luck with it, and we'll see you back soon.